Welcome back to Origami Snowman. My name is Matt. So on this channel, I have a bad habit of talking about things that I know very little about, or I know just enough to get it wrong. So today I want to talk about something that I actually know a lot about. Surprise, surprise. It may not be fun for anyone, but I'm gonna do it. We're gonna talk about school buses. Yep. Yay! No, don't click off. This is good stuff. Ish. So today, I had the pleasure of introducing a friend of mine to school buses. She decided she's gonna have to get a little bit of a job going on. Not just because they need the income, but also because she needs a break. She needs something in her life other than her routine. So having this little gig on the side will break up her routine enough that she can kind of get back to the other stuff with a fresh mind. Okay, which is fine. And she's hilarious. She didn't think it was gonna be a problem, but she wanted to double check. So we went out. We test drove a bus. Took my bus to one of the many parking lots that my district owns, and she tootled around in the parking lot for a bit. Drove over a couple of curbs, cussed a lot. It was a good time. It was really fun. Talked about theory, and she had a lot of questions. You know, most people do. You know, how hard is it? Like, are the kids crazy? What's traffic like in a bus? Oh my, right up the crack. And yeah, you nailed it. Traffic and the kids. Those are the two biggest issues with driving a bus. We'll get to that though. First, I want to talk about how I became a bus driver. I may have discussed this already, but I'm going to do it again because it is relevant to this conversation. So, years and years ago, my wife and I had trouble finding daycare for our son, and we kind of thought, well, if we're having trouble, I'll bet other folks are also having trouble. This might be an opportunity for us to start a new business and, stay home with our son, which we both wanted to do. I wanted to stay home whether he was there or not, but that wasn't really an option. So we started a daycare. And we ran that daycare for 12 years. All three of my kids pretty much grew up in the daycare with all these other kids. And I do have some fond memories of that daycare. But I will say, when we finally decided to stop, we were both very burnt out. It's running your own business, dealing with insurance stuff, trying to budget everything. That is very stressful. And I know this because my wife kept telling me how hard it was and how she wishes I would help. But I knew, hey, if this is stressful, I don't want any part of it. I have my reasons. It's fine. Whatever. Yes, she did all of the paperwork. I'm not going to justify it, but that's the way it is. Okay, so when we closed down our daycare, we didn't really know what we were going to do. We didn't have a backup plan. We just knew we needed to change gears and go in a different direction. I had just published my first novel, The Blood Pines, and so there was part of me in the back of my mind thinking, I don't know why she's so, worked up. I mean, this book is obviously going to, blow up. It's going to change our lives, They're probably going to make it into a movie. I'm going to win an Oscar for best, original, or not original screenplay, but best adapted screenplay. I mean, we're on easy street now, baby, but you can't say those things out loud because when you're an adult, you're not allowed to have dreams. It's too late for that. Go be sad. So I went to be sad, but she had other plans. She and her mother were out for a walk, and they happened to walk past the transportation center very near our house. And we had a couple of friends who were bus drivers, and they always posted funny things on Facebook about it, and they seemed to enjoy it. And my wife texted me, what about being a bus driver? Now, when we had discussed what it was I wanted to do for a job, I had two rules. I said, I don't want to drive anything like my dad. I don't want to be a truck driver. I'd like to stay away from that. Now at this point, my dad was already dead, so it wasn't like he was going to go, ha ha, taking after me, huh? Which is exactly what he would have done. And I would have no recourse because I didn't want to talk to him about anything, even to prove him wrong. So I didn't want to drive anything like my dad, and I was done working with kids. I knew those were the only two things, the only two rules that I had. So when she said, "What about being a bus driver?" I was like, two things. One, I'm pretty sure that you have to drive the bus, and they fill them with kids. I don't know if you knew that. So both of my rules broken. Boom, that's not going to work. However, my response was neither quick enough nor intelligent enough because she had already sent messages to our other bus driving friends who, wow, enthusiastically took the ball and ran with it so fast. They were already waiting for my application before I even submitted it. Like it was a done deal. I showed up to my interview. I showed up to my interview in my nicest t-shirt. It only had one stain on it, and my pants they barely had holes. I was overweight, long nasty beard, tattoos. I cussed in my interview. I talked about how annoying kids can be sometimes. Man, I will tell you what, I did everything I could. Even on my application, there's a part where it says, is there anything else about you that might be helpful? I said, I kind of look like a pirate, not sure if that helps. Yeah, no, I don't even think they looked at my application. I misunderstood the assignment. They were so desperate for help that I could have failed my drug test and my background test check, and they probably still would have been like, it'll be fine. We'll just keep an eye on them. I didn't try very hard, which, granted, has kind of been my thing, but yeah, I got the job. And man, when I saw what I was going to have to learn in order to pass my test, I panicked and I was very angry. I'm a writer, I am a big fan of words and how they go together and how they transmit information. And I'm not a stickler for the rules, but there are certain rules that I think are important. Things like punctuation and proper tenses and, just things like that. My training manual that the trainer had typed up herself had so little of those important things that I couldn't tell what was a typo and what was just a variation. There were so many typos. At one point I got to a point where it talks about the tread depth on the front tires being 4/32 of an inch deep. And then the tread depth on the rear tires was 2/32. And I was like, I don't know if that's a typo or not. I have no idea how I'm supposed to learn any of this. I was so mad. There was one portion on these notes, and I still have them. I found an old copy. I have updated these dramatically, by the way, like all sorts of things. But there was one little line. It said, "Here is my spare fuses in place." That's all it said. Here is my spare fuses in place. I had no idea what the flip that meant. And I got very angry and I shouted and I threw the packet of papers across the room. And my wife yelled, "Knock it off. We need the insurance." So I had no choice. I had to learn this crap. So what exactly did I have to learn? Let me tell you. The process. I'll just go through the whole process. If you were to walk in to any transportation center, of any school district pretty much in the country. And if you can pass a drug screen, a DOT physical, and a background check, you got a good shot at it. Here we go. You ready? Awesome. There is a 200-point inspection, and that is from bumper to bumper, inside and out, under the hood. You know, you're covering, like I said, tread depth on the tires. You're verifying, or, well, maybe not verifying, but you're acknowledging that you know what the appropriate PSI is on the tires. It's 100 PSI, by the way, if you're curious. You need to be able to, you stand at the front of the bus, make sure it's balanced. There are no leaks, drips, or puddles. The school bus reflector tape is properly mounted and secure. It's not cracked, damaged, or leaking. And yeah, you say properly mounted and secure and cracked, damaged, or leaking. That's how we train them for every part, just about. It covers everything. It covers everything. Now, you might think, but how is, like, my headlights, they're not cracked, damaged, or leaking? How are my headlights leaking? Well, they shouldn't be leaking. That'd be awfully weird if they were leaking. I feel like the examiner would be thrilled to hear that your headlights aren't leaking. Check. Next item. So you're literally naming off all the parts that you didn't know existed. You got the tie rod ends. You got the slack adjuster and the push rod. You got to, make sure that slack adjuster and push rod's properly mounted and secure, not cracked, damaged, or leaking. It's properly greased, and there's no more than 1 inch play when the parking brake is released. There's so much stuff that you have to learn. And if you're not a car person, even if you are a car person, it's a lot of work. I got in an argument one time with a car guy who did not want to say that his brake drums had no welds. Well, that's part of the test. You got to say that. And he said, they're cast iron. They're not going to have welds. I don't want to look like an idiot. So yes, it is possible to go into this training process with too much information. The more people know, the harder it is for them. I did have one trainee one of my favorites, just absolutely phenomenal young lady. She was 25 years old, had just she'd gotten out of college, just a couple years before. So she was still kind of in that I'm ready to learn kind of mindset that you are in your early to mid 20s. And she didn't know anything at all that we were doing. She worked her butt off. She learned that stuff so fast. She was having all sorts of trouble with her own car, so she took it into the garage, and they said, well, your tie rod is bent. She thought, I know what that is. We got those on the buses. And she said, how much is it to cost? And he goes, well, to replace your tie rod, it's going to be about $700. And she was like, I don't have $700. And the guy chuckled at her. He goes, well, you could probably try to replace it yourself. So she did. She took her little Mazda home, parked it in her dad's driveway, popped it up on some blocks, changed out the tie rod and the tie rod ends, took it in to get realigned, and the guy said, whoa, your tie rod ends aren't nearly tight enough. So he did that for free, and she was like, nice. I replaced my own tie rod. I was so proud of her. I'm telling you, it was great. So you got to learn the 200-point inspection, and you will learn it all. You learn the 3-point brake check, which is a real headache because if you miss one part of that, they fail you outright. You can miss 12 points overall and everything, but that 3-point brake check, nope, you got to get it right. Absolutely. You end up doing what's called a skills test. And here in Indiana, for the time being, this is about to change this summer. They've made all sorts of changes, and they're not telling us until they pull the trigger in and put them into action, which is unfortunate because the people I'm training are learning the old way, and they will not be ready to train before the new way goes into effect, so I'm going to have to retrain them all, and I'm a little angry about it. I'm bitter! Anyway, you do forward and backward. You literally drive forward straight through a row of like cones, of orange traffic cones, and then you back in a straight line. And where you stop, you're trying to basically get the cones, the last 2 cones in line, about 3 feet from your front bumper. So it's testing how well you use your mirrors and how well you can back up. The second part of the skills test is called offset parking. It's essentially changing lanes in reverse. It's not super hard. You can usually kind of wiggle it in. It's a very you just feel the bus and you watch your mirrors and you get there. Sorry, I just hiccuped and burped all at the same time, and part of me tried to implode and part of me tried to explode, and it equalized. And now I feel like I just got, caught up in like a gas explosion while trying to light a bonfire. Anyway, the third part of the skills test, you do have to parallel park a bus. And I'm dead serious. It is not as hard as you would think to parallel park a bus. We have all sorts of little tricks and all sorts of little helping, markers and things to look for, and it's pretty awesome. It's my favorite thing to teach because coming into it, my friend, when I told her, I said one of the things that we'll test on, you have to parallel park a bus, and she turned to me and said, "I gotta parallel park this thing." I'm sorry. I know that messes with my sound, but it was so funny. Her genuine, honest reaction was it was nearly genuine rage, and I loved it. So, but it's not as bad as all that, because you get a lot of people who come into it and they're terrified. They're like, I can't parallel park. This is going to be the thing that makes me fail. Oh, I'm going to go in and take this test. I'm going to pay my $100, and they're going to fail me on this one thing. I know everything else, but I love that moment when they get it and they get out and they look and they see, wait a minute, I did it. I didn't hit any cones. I didn't go over the boundary. I did it. And like, they're so proud of themselves. It's such a fun moment. And more than once, I've almost cried because they were so proud of themselves. These people who come in and they're like, I've never driven anything bigger than like our Subaru. And now they're parallel parking a bus. Oh, it's so good. On top of that, you have to take a pre-service class, which is a 3-day class where they show you all sorts of pictures of buses on fire and videos of gunmen hijacking buses. And they try to make you not want to drive a bus. I don't know why they do that. It seems like counterproductive, but that's the state. And you have to do observation, and you got to spend a lot of driving time. And so there's quite a lot of stuff. We just had a guy go through training. It took him 3 weeks. He was very driven. And, one of those weeks, half of the week, he was sitting in class. So he really put his foot down and got it done. Good for him. Well done. I've had other people take 4 months. And if it takes you 4 months, I want it to take you 4 months. I don't want to rush anybody. The last thing I want is to rush you through, get you to pass the test, and then put your nervous hiney on a bus with a bunch of kids. That's bad business. Don't do that, because you're going to be the only one out there. And if you're freaking out, that's not great for the kids. So I'm fine with people speed running it. But if you need to take your time, I'm happy making sure you take your time. I went over a little bit, didn't I? I'm on 92:52. Anyway, yep, that's bad. I should have stopped a while ago. So anyway, once you've done all your training and everything, then you go in for your test. Like I said, it's about $100, at least here in Indiana at this testing site that we use. The rumor is they're going to bump it up to about $150. Me personally, I am trying, or rather, I'm hoping that they will allow for a limited examiner's license, in which case I will become an examiner if I can, if it's, if it's feasible. And then I will be an independent examiner. I will have a course laid out, and I will, charge people, and that'll be a very healthy chunk of money coming in. I don't know if I'll still be able to train. Well, there goes the ball. But it is what it is. So you go in for the test. It's $100. You do your 200-point inspection, your 3-point brake check. And then you drive your skills course. And then you have to demonstrate the unloading procedure for passengers. And then you go out on a road test. Like, I drive all over this little town and try to stay off the paint, Don't hit any curbs. Hitting a curb, that's an automatic fail. Don't, don't get loosey-goosey behind the wheel. And if they see something that concerns them, if they look at this person and think, I don't want this guy driving like a Honda Civic, let alone a school bus. And he said some concerning things. I certainly don't think he ought to be on a bus with kids. Then they will find a way to fail you. It's their neck on the line if you do something dumb. If you get out there and you're, sideswiping cars and bouncing all over and running from the police, they're going to pull the records and they're going to say to the examiner, you signed off on this. You said this guy was ready to go. You put him behind the wheel of a bus. And they have to be able to justify why they did that. So, there's a lot of responsibility on those guys. So sometimes when people fail, it's not necessarily because they did all the things wrong. It might be because the examiner saw something that didn't quite sit right. Now, I don't know for a fact that this happens. I've heard things and seen some things. But I myself would feel absolutely horror struck if I licensed someone and they ended up causing a fatality through negligence. That would be the worst thing ever. So anyway, I went through that whole process myself, and I was so nervous the day of my test that I woke up with a black eye. I had punched myself in the face in my sleep because we were financially at a point where I could not afford to fail this test. I could barely afford to take it once, and that second time, you still it's $100 pass or fail, and I could not afford to fail, so I was very nervous. I didn't fail. I passed. Everything went well. I was a nervous wreck the whole time. And when we started the road test and I was pulling out, and he said, all right, out here, you're going to turn left. And I immediately started to turn right. I thought, well, that's it. Okay, we're done. And he just, no. I think he understood. The guy, I've since gotten to know that guy from bringing other people in to test, and he's a really nice guy. And so he probably just, he probably saw me nervous and took pity on me. Left and right, not part of the test. So that was good. But even at that point, even after I passed my test, I didn't want to be a bus driver. I honestly, I didn't want to do it. I was done working with kids. I didn't want to drive anything. I didn't feel right about it. I felt like I was giving up on my dream of being a writer, which is ridiculous because there's plenty of time to write after you're done with your routes. So, the next day, I drove a route by myself for the first time. The next day. Feels kind of like they threw me on there. We usually have new drivers ride along with an experienced driver who can kind of give them pointers and tips. I'm never going to get this in the stupid hole. But that was when I realized, I had a very packed bus. It was packed. Those buses hold 78 kids. If you put them 3 to a seat, which is the legal amount you're allowed to do, you have a 78 passenger vehicle. And I'm telling you, my route has 42 kids, and there are times when that seems like a lot. 78, I can't, no, it's unbelievably loud. That's how many kids were on this bus that day. It was packed to the gills, and it was mostly after-school care kids. So I went to the first little daycare stop, and I dropped them off, and half of the kids got off, and I went to the second daycare stop, and half of those kids got off, and I was like, that's it? It was all of 13 minutes. That's it. Now, as I drove more and more, I discovered there are two extremely important parts of a school bus: the brakes and the steering wheel. But I would argue that your like the most important part of the school bus is the intercom mic. My favorite part of the bus. I tell you, I would get on there and I would do bus tours. As a sub, nobody's listening to you. Nobody cares. And I would just get on there and I'd say, ladies and gentlemen, if you look out the left side of your bus, you'll see the childhood home of Benjamin Franklin. He was the adopted child of Beyonce Knowles and Oprah Winfrey. A lot of people forget that they were a couple, and I would just say the dumbest things. And the kids were like, what? And some of the older kids, elementary kids, would like realize that, and it went from being cacophonous and deafening to dead silent with laughter. And it was so much fun. And I would tell my stupid jokes and I would take these kids home and drop them off at their daycare or whatever. And kids would leave me little notes like, I wish you could be our bus driver always, and it was just, yeah, I was a sub for a while and I loved it. Like I literally fell in love with driving a school bus right away. Went from not wanting to do it, looking for an out, to just fell in love with it. And ever since I started as a bus driver, I've gotten up every morning at 5 o'clock. I have not missed a single day. It's been nearly 7 years. I have not missed a single day of work. I mean, I have to miss half a day coming up. I have to go out of state for my niece's wedding, and I'm so excited. I'm broken that I have to miss work, but I'm very excited that my niece is getting married. Full disclosure, that's what it is. But so it'll be my first missed day since I started this job. In November, I tell you, I woke up and I knew I was sick, and I ran my route anyway. And on my way back to transportation, I was vomiting violently into the trash can as I, trundled down the road, and the whole time thinking, I'm really good at driving. I wasn't swerving. I wasn't going off the road. I was maintaining. I wasn't going the full 40 miles an hour. I was doing about 35. But, whatever. I just remember thinking, I'm so good at this as I'm. So anyway, I just love my job, and I can't, I can't imagine walking away from it now. So you never know. You never know what's gonna fall in your lap and prove you wrong in all the best ways. I often joke with my wife that she ruined my life in an absolutely amazing way. She doesn't like when I say that, but I've said it, and she said whatever. So my life definitely needed ruined when she came along, and I feel like in a similar fashion, I was blindsided by the bus. It's a culture that I admire, I fit into, and ironically, I hated school, and now I'm in love with making other kids go. I guess hurt people, don't they? I understand that now. All right. I think this next hole will be... Nope, that last one was my last. I'm going to be done. I'm going to end on a really weird hole. Yeah, that's all. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love sharing my dumb little stories with you, and I love that you listen. Anyway, that is all, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.